Nearing a verdict, President Trump narrows the list of candidates for the opening on the Supreme Court. We look at one of the leading contenders. Following up, we examine why Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is headed back to North Korea. The Vatican and Beijing. A Catholic priest previews his trip to China and tells us what it's like for the faithful living in the communist country. And a light birthday party. The nation's capital celebrates the 4th of July. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 5th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump accepts Environmental Protection Agency head Scott Pruitt's resignation. Pruitt faced an array of ethical questions about travel spending and security costs. He denies any wrongdoing. Pruitt was Attorney General of Oklahoma prior to joining the administration. President Trump could select his pick for the Supreme Court as early as today or tomorrow, but he says he won't reveal his choice until Monday. The White House says the president has interviewed at least 7 candidates. 3 of those names are reportedly at the top of the list: federal appeals judges Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Raymond Kethledge.
I think you'll be very impressed. These are very talented people, brilliant people, and I think you're going to really love it. Like Justice Gorsuch, we hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here.
The White House says the president is moving quickly so the nominee can get confirmed and join the High Court when it starts its new session in October. The president's pick could reshape the High Court for a generation. Pro-life groups believe another conservative justice could even overturn Roe v. Wade. And conservatives lobby for or against certain names on President Trump's Supreme Court shortlist. It's a rush behind the scenes. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has that story. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Social conservatives tell me the president would energize the base most if he picked Catholic mother of 7, Amy Coney Barrett. But today I'm learning more about another contender who once wrote about John Paul II, and in photos you'll see here first, he's also a friend of Neil Gorsuch.
The best judges are the ones that seek to apply precedent in good faith. I think most judges do that.
Judge Raymond Kethledge now serves on the appeals court in Michigan. In 2008, the Senate confirmed him unanimously.
Obviously, first and foremost, I'd follow Supreme Court precedent. The other thing I would say is that, again, I would make sure that the values that I would be enforcing if I were a judge are not just my values, that I am not striking something down simply because I don't like it.
A former clerk for the judge says Kethledge looks at cases like Justice Scalia did.
The way he interprets any legal text, it's the same way that we interpret basic English. It's what do those words mean? What would they have meant to the people who wrote them? In legal lingo, it makes them a textualist for statutes, and it makes them an originalist for the purpose of the Constitution.
J.J. Snido in 2014 clerked for the appeals judge.
Wonderful man. Wonderful boss, wonderful mentor.
Both Snido and Kethledge clerked for retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. Kethledge enjoys spending time in nature and fishing with friends, including Justice Neil Gorsuch. He wrote this book on solitude. It includes chapters on moral courage and John Paul II.
Looking at how people like Pope John Paul II had used solitude in their own leadership was really inspiring to him. And having the courage to stand by your convictions is something, obviously, that the Pope really did, and I think Judge Kethledge really respected and admired that.
No one knows whom the president will pick. The big reveal set for Monday. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer told President Trump it would be cataclysmic to put an opponent of abortion on the Supreme Court. Wyatt?
Jason, maybe the president wants that fight, but realistically now, can any of the President Trump shortlist candidates get confirmed?
The nominee needs 51 Senate votes, and there's only 51 GOP senators. With Senator John McCain out, that's 50. 3 Democrats voted for Neil Gorsuch, and all 3 are up for tough re-election bids. If they vote for Trump's nominee, it may help their chances of getting re-elected back home, but then they have to balance that with the fact that liberal groups will be putting maximum pressure on them.
It sounds like it's going to be close either way. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thanks, Jason. And joining me now for more analysis is Mary Walter, WMAL radio co-host of Mornings on the Mall. Mary, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
We just heard from Jason Calvi about the possible pick of Raymond Kethledge. If he is the nominee, would it be easier for him in the confirmation process than Amy Coney Barrett or Brett Kavanaugh?
I think he's almost like the guy who's going to come from behind, because we're hearing so much about the other two, and you're hearing, I think a lot of Democrats really do not like Amy Coney Barrett. They don't like her, which I find interesting, because they're all about women, right? And here's an incredibly accomplished woman. She has 7 children, and look at her. She's raising an incredible family, and she's doing this job and being nominated for the Supreme Court. You would think that she would be someone that the left would want to hold up as an example of a woman who's just so accomplished, but they're going to tear her down. Why? They don't like her religion because she's Catholic. Now, there are 5 Catholics on the Supreme Court right now. Kennedy leaving, she would just be replacing him if she were to be put onto the court. But when Dianne Feinstein made that comment when she was during her confirmation for the 7th Circuit Court, which she's on now, when Dianne Feinstein made that comment about the dogma lives strongly in you, I think that took a lot of people aback, Catholics and non-Catholics alike. Is, wait a minute, are we looking at a religious test here? In a way, that's good, because a lot of those people, a lot of those Democrats voted for her to confirm her to the 7th Circuit. If they don't confirm her to the Supreme Court, why not? And now it kind of puts them in a bad position. So in a way, that would be a smart pick in that sense.
It is interesting. Well, whoever it is, whoever the president picks, he's hoping to get the new justice confirmed before the court reconvenes in October. How likely is that to happen?
You know what? I actually think it's pretty likely. I do, because the Democrats don't have much ammunition. What can they do? They're in the minority. So there's not much that they can do. And Kethledge is a kind of vanilla. He's very much in the vein of Gorsuch, as Jason was saying. They both clerked under Kennedy. So that's a really good sign, because look at Gorsuch got through. So that would be probably a good chance for Kethledge to get through as well, because of the fact he's not controversial. You don't really hear a lot about him, you know. So I think maybe that he might. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one who gets the nomination. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, timing is everything. So let's say you're right. Let's say it does happen. How would the pick impact midterm elections?
Really interesting on midterms, because you've got a lot of Democrats in these red states. You know, the president is now out in Montana. Why? John Tester. And Tester's I think Trump won Montana by, 20 points? So he's got to walk that line. You've got Manchin in West Virginia. You've got Heidi Heitkamp. You've got these Democrats who have to make their constituents happy because they're in a red state if they want to be reelected. So they're going to be in a very interesting position about having to vote for them if the Democrats want to keep their seat. Because if they don't vote for the Supreme Court nominee, there's a really good chance they won't get reelected, and it can be used against them in the midterms.
Makes such for an interesting dynamic.
It's so exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. Senator Susan Collins, moderate Republican from Maine, reiterated that she would not vote for a nominee with a demonstrated, which they quote, demonstrated hostility to Roe versus Wade, that landmark case. Is it likely that any of the president's picks could actually lead the way for overturning it, or are we too soon on this?
I think it's way soon. And you also have Lisa Murkowski's another one, who said that she would have a problem with someone who'd be willing to, looks like they'd lead an overturn of Roe v. Wade. I think if anything you see, it gets kicked back to the states. I think that's as far as it's going to go, is that it's going to get kicked back to the states. And then that'll be a whole nother process. But I don't see any of the 3 of them saying, wow, this is what I'm going to do when I get on the Supreme Court. And there has to be a case brought.
Right, exactly. You have to have the right case and the right circumstances in place for that.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Mary Walter, co-host of WMAL's Mornings on the Mall, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you so much.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on his way to North Korea for talks with the country's leader, Kim Jong-un. America's top diplomat is under pressure to produce tangible signs that the North is really dismantling their nuclear facilities. Secretary Mike Pompeo saying little about the state of U.S.-North Korea negotiations since the June summit between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump. But as Pompeo makes his 3rd trip in 3 months, he knows the North needs to show they're getting rid of their nuclear arsenal. Christopher Hill is the former ambassador to South Korea.
And I think one of the key questions as well is, what's the architecture of this going to be? Is it really going to be the U.S. talks to North Korea and then we go belatedly tell the Chinese what we agreed on, or tell the South Koreans?
Hill saying multinational efforts are the key to getting results. South Korea has downplayed global concerns. Kim has no intention of engaging in a full denuclearization program. A recent report indicated U.S. intelligence has reason to believe there is still activity at various nuclear fuel and missile sites in the country. Just ahead of Pompeo's arrival in Pyongyang, 2 days of friendly basketball games between the Koreas, the latest in a series of goodwill gestures in recent months. State Department officials say Pompeo and his team are aware of North Korea's history of delays and broken promises and are taking that into account.
The secretary is looking forward to having meetings with his North Korean counterparts, and we go into this eyes wide open, but nevertheless, we've made a lot of progress.
The Vatican's foreign minister is also offering his support and prayers for peace talks. Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Holy See's Secretary for Relations with States, met today with President Moon Jae-in in Seoul, saying Pope Francis sends his prayers for peace and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. The Department of Health and Human Services says U.S. lawmakers visiting shelters to see migrant children are wasting staff resources that could be used to help connect kids and parents. HHS wrote a letter Tuesday to leaders of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees saying nearly 500 work hours have been devoted to arranging visits for the shelters for more than 70 lawmakers. They're asking members of Congress to submit requests 2 weeks in advance. Democrats say immediate access to the shelters should be granted. The Archbishop of Adelaide, Australia, who was sentenced this week for covering up child sex abuse, says he's appealing the verdict. Archbishop Philip Wilson is the most senior Catholic cleric to be convicted of such crimes and was sentenced to 12 months home detention. He says he'll only offer his resignation to Pope Francis if his appeal fails. The rescue ship Open Arms, carrying 60 migrants, arrives in Spain. The ship had been refused entry into both Italy and Malta. The migrants come from 14 countries, and they arrived yesterday in relatively good health. It is the second time in a month Italy and Malta have refused entry to a boat full of migrants. The Italian government says it did so to discourage human traffickers. In China, Catholics are hoping dialogue between the Vatican and the communist government will lead to a better church environment. China has Catholic churches both recognized and not recognized by the government. Our next guest is heading to the country as the two sides aim for respectful talks. For more on this, we turn to Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo, who's an EWTN special contributor who joins us from Rome. Monsignor, update us on the current situation for Catholics in China.
This is the 10th year I go to China, and my sense is always Catholics in China, sheep without a shepherd. We're talking about a nation of some 2 billion people, 100 million Christians, but just 12 million Catholics. Not growing in numbers, whereas evangelicals are able to evangelize unhindered, the Roman Catholic Church is simply stuck in not being able to evangelize because of the great difficulty regarding the appointment of bishops. Of course, the great concern of Pope Francis is to evangelize the peripheries, and so that's why I go to China to help the bishops in this task.
Okay, so like you mentioned, you're heading to China tomorrow. Tell me more about the purpose of the trip. Expand on that a little bit more and tell me who you're going to be meeting with.
Absolutely. 10th year, we are invited specifically by the Chinese Bishops' Conference with the full knowledge of the government of China and also the support of the Holy See. Pope Francis spoke recently about relationship with China on 3 different levels. One is the diplomatic level. The second is on the level of simple friendship. The third, he said, the most important is the cultural. That includes formation. The great problem in China today is formation. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. And the bishops lack formation, priests lack formation, seminarians lack formation, and religious sisters lack formation. So we have entire dioceses, those responsible for the faith of their people, themselves not formed. That is specifically why I'm invited, together with a couple of other specialists, to help the bishops in this task. It's exciting, it's unique, but it really is needed.
What could a possible deal between the Chinese government and the Vatican look like? And do you think one could actually happen soon, realistically?
As Pope Francis has said, things are going well. You know, any deal has to preserve the successor of Peter as the highest and ultimate deciding factor in the appointment of bishops. It has to take account of 30 underground bishops who need to be recognized as part of the Chinese Bishops' Conference. And it also has to deal with 7 illegitimate bishops, self-appointed, self-ordained, who need to be in communion with the successor of Peter. I know for a fact that they do want that communion. So the deal is going ahead, but we need to be prudent, we need to be patient. But listen, Wyatt, you know, the choice is between evangelizing or staying in the current situation where 2 billion people do not hear the good news of Jesus Christ. We want the salvation of souls, and that's why I'm very happy to travel to China tomorrow simply to help the bishops in that task. The salvation of one soul in the Jewish tradition is the salvation of the entire nation. So this kairos, this window of opportunity that Pope Francis is opening, in continuity, I would say, with St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict, I really believe we need to welcome. There is no reward without risks. They need to be give and take on both sides. But in this way, I really believe we can open an entire nation to evangelization.
Well, I'm sure our EWTN viewers who are watching this program will be praying for you and your trip, as well as for all Catholics working in China. Monsignor Anthony Figueredo, EWTN Special Contributor, thanks so much.
Thank you. I look forward to telling your viewers all about it when I return. God bless you all.
Pope Francis names the first ever layperson to head a major Vatican office. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley has more from Rome.
Wyatt, Pope Francis has tapped Paolo Ruffini to lead the communications for the Vatican. It's part of an ongoing overhaul of the department for the Holy See. Now, Ruffini's been a journalist for nearly 40 years and until now has worked as a director for the Italian Bishops television channel. Ruffini replaces Monsignor Dario Vigano, who stepped down in March after parts of a letter from Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI to Pope Francis were blurred out when released to the media. In a recent interview with Reuters, Wyatt, Pope Francis said he had initially offered the job as his communications chief to a woman, but that she had declined due to previous commitments. At the Vatican, Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Juliet, for that report. EWTN CEO Michael Warsaw is a consultant for the department. Coming up, authorities in England react after a second couple is poisoned with a nerve agent. And why there is some worrying news for 12 boys and their soccer coach stuck in a cave in Thailand. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A couple in England has been poisoned with a nerve agent, Novichok. It is the second such case since March.
To see 2 more people exposed to the Novichok in the UK is obviously deeply disturbing, and the police, I know, will be leaving no stone unturned.
At this point, UK officials say they do not think it was a targeted attack. The couple may have been poisoned while visiting in Salisbury, England, near the site where a former Russian spy and his daughter became sick. Both later recovered. The poison was created in the Soviet Union, leading British officials to believe Russia was involved. Rescuers are trying to figure out how they will get a boys' soccer team and their coach out of a cave in Thailand. One major problem: heavy storms are in the forecast. Emergency services are trying to drain the water from the cave. The only current way out would be for the boys to navigate the underwater route of narrow passageways that their rescuers used, but even that is dangerous for expert divers. The group was discovered on Monday after 10 days cut off from the outside world. Among those sending thoughts and prayers to the boys, Japan's World Cup team, which sent a message today following its exit in tournament's round of 16. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Jennifer Christie opens up about why she chose life for her son, even after she was a victim of a rape.
And I remember thinking, okay, I couldn't protect myself. You know, I fought and I tried, but there was nothing I could do, but I could protect that baby. And it was my baby.
You can see Catherine Hadrow's interview with Jennifer Christie tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Head over to EWTN.com for more times. Up next, we'll hear about the future of the American worker in the age of smartphones and robots. and how the nation's capital celebrated the 4th of July. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Conservationists in Peru are working to save priceless pieces of art from being ruined. Many of the objects are from Catholic churches. Around 50 people are restoring centuries-old paintings and sculptures. Many are of Catholic saints, angels, and Christ on the cross. In the past couple of years, the team with Peru's Ministry of Culture are credited with saving 500 pieces of art. Says one employee, they are like patients suffering from terminal cancer who we're bringing back to life. A Christian aid organization in Iraq says it is shifting its focus from housing to restoring religious structures. Aid to the Church in Need wants to rebuild churches and monasteries. Many were destroyed by ISIS. For more details on the story, including a look at all of the work Aid to the Church in Need has done so far, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A new challenge is on the horizon for American workers: how to adapt in a world where automation and artificial intelligence are becoming more and more common in the workplace. I talked with the author of a new book that looks at the role of new technology and its impact on the future of work. Joining me now is Jay Richards, host of the EWTN program A Force for Good and author of the new book, The Human Advantage, The Future of American Work in an Age of Smart Machines. Jay, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Wyatt.
In your book, you point out throughout history that workers have used technology to help them get work done faster, more efficiently. What's different about the way that we're using technology nowadays?
Well, you could think of previous technology as labor-saving devices, so a tractor that makes it much easier to move stuff around. Now we're not only replacing our labor, but many of the things that we thought were the sort of exclusive jurisdiction of our minds. So this is the whole question about artificial intelligence, about robotics, in which machines, or machines that we make, nevertheless do a lot of the things that until a few decades ago we thought, well, only humans can do that.
Well, how do you think we as Americans should view this from a free market standpoint, this surge in automation, artificial intelligence? I mean, do you see this as a threat to American workers?
I don't see it as a threat or an apocalypse. This is why one of the reasons I wrote the book was to challenge this idea that there's a robot apocalypse coming. What I think we need to expect is major disruption. So anything that's really easily automated, repetitive work, either if it's office work or factory work, that's going to probably get automated. Even driving taxis and Ubers is going to get automated. But if you're doing things either that involve complex bodily interactions, the skilled trades, we're not going to master robotics to do plumbing anytime soon. And if you do things that involve real creative freedom, which is actually more than you would expect, then don't worry so much about those kinds of automation. But if you're doing a job that you think, gosh, this is very routine, you probably want to be training for something else.
Let me follow up with you on that, because you mentioned plumbing, for example. So do you think blue-collar workers are more at risk, and what does this mean for white-collar worker jobs?
Yep, we often think, okay, well, robotics is just going to target blue-collar workers. But in fact, if you think about what's happened, a huge number of insurance adjusters, a huge number of stock traders, have been entirely automated. And then factory work that's routine, that kind of blue-collar work, that's much more at risk than skilled trades that involve carpentry or machinery or electrician work, for instance. There's actually a shortage of skilled trade jobs right now in a lot of the country. And so what we want to do is separate different kinds of white-collar work and blue-collar work. Some is in danger in the near term, some is not.
Are we seeing most companies provide more training to help workers keep up? And if they don't take some kind of training, are workers basically being left behind at this point?
Well, this is the danger, and my advice in the book is don't expect that either trade school or 4 years in college is going to prepare you for a 40-year career. I mean, there are things we're training for right now, they'll be obsolete in 10 years. So yes, get training for what you can do now, but think of your life as continuous education. So you're constantly teaching yourself, free online or taking classes, so that, because the reality is that it's the disruption and the pace of change that's going to be different from previous shifts, say from the agrarian to the industrial economy.
It's a good piece of advice. How do you think we as Catholics should incorporate this idea of automation, artificial intelligence responsibly and in a moral way?
Two things. Don't fall for the myth that computers and robots are going to become conscious. There's a difference between man and machine, and they're never going to merge. So don't worry about the robots taking over. But secondly, remember that technology is the fact that it's the result of us being created in the image of the creative God. So God doesn't create everything on its own. He creates the sand and leaves it to us to make computer chips and fiber optic cables. So think of this as technology that extends our creativity, and just try to use the benefits and stay away from the costs, which there definitely will be.
Well, it is a fascinating discussion and one that people are going to be thinking about, of course, for years and decades to come. Jay Richards, host of A Force for Good and author of the new book, The Human Advantage. Thanks so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
And finally tonight, the 4th of July celebrations began with parades and cookouts, and in many places, including the nation's capital, it ended with fireworks. The fireworks honoring America on its 242nd birthday. In Washington, the party had the Capitol, Lincoln Memorial, and Washington Monument as a backdrop. Not far away, President Trump held a ceremony at the White House. Earlier, he had invited 1,500 military families for a 4th of July picnic. And that wraps up our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.